This building behind me and next to me says everything. This is the world-renowned Weizmann Institute, where the most advanced cutting-edge research is done for human biology, medical research, genetic research, smashed by this rocket from this evil regime, by this missile, with a ton of payload to destroy human progress. That's what this regime is about. That's what the Iranian tyrants are about.
בעצם עודדת אותם להיכנס למלחמה מול סדאם בעיראק, ועכשיו הם אומרים למה שהפעם זה לא אותו דבר, למה הפעם אנחנו לא נסתבך.
As long as it takes. That's the answer. As long as it takes, because we face an existential danger, a dual existential danger. One from 20,000 such rockets, 20,000, not one. This is one rocket, one missile. And the other is, of course, atomic bombs in the hands of this mad regime.
The attacks between Israel and Iran. So let's get straight to it. These are the latest news bulletins. As you can see, Israel launches attacks on northwest Iran as Iran fires more drones toward Israel in day 9 of the conflict. Iran says more than 400 people have been killed and at least 3,056 others wounded since Israel launched its attack on June 13th. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says it would be very dangerous for everybody if the United States joins Israel's aggression. French President Emmanuel Macron says he and Iranian counterpart Masoud Pezeshkian have agreed to accelerate nuclear negotiations between Europe powers and Iran. President Trump publicly rebuked his Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, saying she was wrong to state that there was no evidence Iran is building a nuclear weapon. Now, in the light of what's going on, it seems the United States has taken a backseat. This is decisions made by the Department of Defense, as well as the director of the CIA, probably telling them that, listen, this is a long, drawn-out war, unlike Iraq, where they have a formidable military, as well as having a geological advantage, a strategic advantage regarding the mountainous regions to the south, as well as posing a threat to the region itself, because that means by default, Lebanon will get involved as well. And I'm sure Syrian proxy forces are still existing in the country, but just not in the main areas like Damascus. What would be the Gulf's response? I would figure that the Gulf, like Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, want to play peacekeepers as they try to reform to appease their masters in the United States as well. So let's talk about what's a prescient issue. Israel strikes Iran's Isfahan nuclear site. Buildings on fire in Tel Aviv. I can't believe I'm saying that. Buildings on fire in Tel Aviv. No country that I have ever seen attack Israel in such ways like Iran does. Now, this is really huge because it shows that the Iron Dome really is not as a perfect mechanism for defense as some here in the United States would tell you. That Israel, when facing against a country that can defend itself, won't fare too well. Now, a key nuclear site in Iran's Isfahan Province has come under Israeli attack, with local officials saying there was no radiation leaks. And this is a specific attack. It's a proficient attack against Iranian nuclear sites. Poses two problems. One, disables them from having any type of acceleration in making a nuclear weapon if they wanted to. Two, it's also an environmental disaster. Now, this is what and we're going to get into this in a minute, where humanitarian law is against, because this poses a threat to the civilian population, especially in Isfahan. Now, Israel doesn't give two shits about international law or humanitarian law. They're the biggest abusers of this. Early on Saturday, smoke could be seen rising from an area near a mountain in the city of Isfahan, and Israel airstrikes hit the nuclear site overnight, triggering the air defense system. It was the second attack on Isfahan as the conflict between the Middle Eastern nations entered the second week, killing at least 430 people, 3,500 others. And this is, you know, a, this could be really a big tragedy if there are types of petroleum leaks that could basically pose an environmental disaster. But Isfahan attack said there were no casualties reported. Israel's army released video and photos, it says, showing an attack on the Isfahan nuclear facility. And, what does this mean regarding the long run? Does this mean that they could keep attacking nuclear sites? Well, it is against humanitarian law. And I want to talk about this because nobody really talks about it, how humanitarian law applies to armed conflict and nuclear power plants. As you can see, this is from the International Committee of the Red Cross. Is the International Committee of the Red Cross concerned about the conduct of hostilities around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine? Yes. Now, this is not just for Ukraine. I'm just bringing this as an example. Nuclear power plants, such as the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, contain radioactive material, which could be released when various components of the station are destroyed, damaged, or their functionality is impaired. I just wanted to bring that up because when I go down here, and as you can see, it says, are nuclear power plants protected during armed conflict? Yes. Nuclear power plants are civilian objects. As such, they are protected against attack and reprisals and must not be targeted. In case of doubt, such objects must be presumed to be civilian. Parties must also take consent care to spare the civilian population, civilians and civilian objects in all military operations, given the risk of release of radiation and consequent grave effects on civilians. Parties need to exercise extreme caution when conducting troop movements, maneuvers, and other military activities in the vicinity of nuclear power plants. But Israel committed a targeted attack on nuclear facilities. They can't claim that this was an accident. They were targeted. And Israel even admits as such. Can nuclear power plants be attacked merely because they are used by one party for military purposes? No. For those who are claiming that they could be attacked because they're used by military purposes. No, weaks and installations containing dangerous forces such as nuclear power plants benefit from specific protection under international humanitarian law. They cannot be attacked just because they would have become military objectives, as such an attack may cause the release of dangerous forces and consequent severe losses among the civilian population. Under certain conditions, launching an attack against nuclear power plants may constitute a war crime. The United States is basically coordinating with their leaders in what is called principles meetings about threats to national security, with Iran being at the top of the list, along with Russia and China. This is the Republicans' threats to national security. Now, just recently, you had Tulsi Gabbard, the director of the National Intelligence, who gave a press briefing that stated that Iran itself was a threat to national security. Now, I got to admit here that this is basically a ridiculous notion that Iran could be a threat to any country, specifically Israel, and by default, United States, because that's who Israel relies on for military protection. Now, I'm not going to sit here and basically tell you about how great the Iranian government is. In fact, it's not. What But what I want to show you is basically a clip from Tulsi Gabbard, in which she taking testimony about whether or not Iran is at the point that it will produce a nuclear weapon within weeks to months. And so I'm gonna, play this. This is her Twitter. I made a new Twitter account. So this is her Twitter here. And just take a listen to this. I'm gonna have to play it on speaker, right? Because of the simple fact that I had it on headphones. So here we go.
And defensive during the Gaza conflict. Developed and maintains ballistic missiles, cruise systems capable of striking U.S. targets and countries in the region. Iran has shown a willingness to use these weapons, including Iraq, and in attacks against Israel in April 2004. Iran's cyber operations capabilities threat to U.S. networks and data. The IC continues to assess that Iran is building a nuclear weapon and supremely program that he suspended in 2003. If Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons. In the past year, we've seen an erosion of its public, likely emboldening nuclear weapons out of the apparatus. Iran's enriched uranium and is unprecedented for a state without nuclear weapons. Iran will likely continue efforts to counter Israel and constitute its loose consortium like-minded terrorists, which it refers to as its axis of resistance. Although weakened actors still presents a wide range of threats, in Syria and to U.S. and international military and commercial.
Okay, so there you have it, right? So that's the problem we have here is that they're trying to make Iran into a terrorist threat. It's not, and they will be if there's a type of terrorist false flag event where Hezbollah militias enter the United States or Al Qaeda militias are given profiles that are to blame against Iran itself. Something I could see where Al Qaeda in Syria or Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula under al-Awlaki basically provide martyrdom militants to basically pose as Hezbollah militants because from deception thou shalt do war, as Israel's Mossad would say. And so I would be very careful in judgment regarding who's to blame for what in what the next couple of weeks to months will bring. Now, my opinion means nothing in this direction. So, if we look at the article posed by CNN, right? But still, I mean, not everything is false, not everything is true. You just have to read between the lines. And this article is pretty good because it talks about the U.S. can end the conflict with one call. Official from Iran's presidency says this is true. Diplomacy with Iran can easily be started again if U.S. President Trump orders Israel's leadership to stop its strikes on Iran. Majid Farani, an official with the Iranian presidency, told CNN on Friday, Iran believes in civilian dialogue. Directly, indirectly is not important. Trump can easily stop the war by one phone call to the Israelis. Yes, just like Biden could have ended the conflict with the Israelis with a phone call, and just like Trump could have ended the situation in Gaza with a phone call, but they didn't because the Palestinians don't threaten the region. Iran can, right? And this is the reason why they don't give a shit about human life. Neither does the United States nor Israel. They care about their strategic partners and what they could bring. Everyone's selfish in this direction. We're a nation run by psychopaths. You people of the left and right who are divided by your own ignorance, you better start waking up, because you'll be fighting each other to the point where one of yous will lose, and then one of yous will be weakened by the conflict, and you'll be taken over by the very same entity that made you believe that way. Now, what will be the response of the United States? In my opinion, again, worth nothing, but I don't think the United States is getting involved. I think they are going to, I think Trump is going to be persuaded by by the DCI, and as well as the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Pentagon, CIA, and they'll basically tell them, look, this is a strategic disadvantage for us. We're fighting against a military that's emboldened. We're fighting against a country that is still under its, this divisiveness, but not to the point where they're basically, debased. The sanctions really haven't worked to our advantage. And maybe, just maybe, we'll just have to allow for a tit for tat until Israel, tells the United States, look, we're taking enough damage, maybe come in and, be an advisor to a ceasefire. And what will happen, my opinion, what will happen in the background is you'll have the intelligence services for Israel, along with the Gulf, and probably the United States. Maybe not, but I'm for sure Israel and the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, Syria, will basically act in accordance of facilitating a war. Now, what benefit does this for Saudi Arabia? And like I said in previous videos, there are multiple benefits here. 9/11 wasn't just a benefit for Israel, as some truthers would like to think. It benefited Saudi Arabia, benefited the Gulf, benefited the private military industrial complex, and benefited the intelligence services, foreign and domestic. It benefited the United States government to an extent, because we entered so many wars, enacted so many laws, and allowed for the United States to overcome civil liberties against their own citizens. Carte blanche when it comes to abusing the privacy laws. The National Defense Authorization Act of 2003 and 2004, the Patriot Act. I could go on. But with this will benefit the Gulf because of two areas. One is an ideological difference, and that is the divisiveness between the two major branches of Islam, Sunni and Shia. Saudi Arabia wants to be the Sunni leadership. You want to be seen as the face of Sunni Islam in all of Islam. Second, Iran is the major face of Shia Islam. And without them, they can destroy that branch of Islam. And all the Alawites, all the Sufis, and destroy these branches in the long run. Also, it benefits Israel, of course, right? With the Gulf remaining, because if Iran loses, the United States gets involved, destroys the country, or comes nearly implementing its own Western leaders, gets rid of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, gets rid of the proxy forces. What's left? Lebanon by default will be destroyed. Syria is already taken over by an al-Qaeda leader. Jordan and Turkey are going to go along with this. And then what's left? Israel, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf, and the United States, right? And like I said, the real axis of evil. And then they could just turn their attention to either Russia or China. The United States is not going to get into a dual war here. Not going to fight China and not going to fight Iran at the same time. I think the China war is basically a war that they know they can't win. And Iran is going to be pretty pretty much a 5 to 10 year type of conflict. It's not going to be Iraq overnight. They defeated Iraq in weeks. Was it 2 weeks or a week regarding in the first Gulf War? But in this, the second one, 2003, it took, a couple of years, but they destabilized the country, which was already, halfway destroyed under the tough economic sanctions under the Bush Jr. administration. And then you had a civil war under the Obama administration that basically furthered the divide between Sunni and Shia there and gave the rise to the Islamic State in Levant. So what would be our next war after Iran? Well, we'll be fighting against Abu Muhammad al-Jilani in Syria because the rise of Islamic militancy. Because what will happen, right? If this scenario played out, right? A terrorist attack, a false flag type of event, terrorist attack that is probably going to be conducted by al-Qaeda, blamed on Hezbollah, blamed on Iran, and by default, Lebanon. And then the United States internally will go through a major change. One, stricter immigration law. Of course, conservatives are basically going to say, we were right. We were right all along about the terrorist regime. The media is going to basically, in the next couple of days, because in the first couple of days, there's no script. It's hard to have a script when it's live media. But later on, they're going to have, their editors are basically going to say, listen, we got this story, we got this intelligence, blah, blah, blah. You know where it's coming from, right? So basically they'll say, oh, these people, we know who these people are. It'll be blamed on Iran. And then we'll have, oh, we need to do something. And the terrorist attacks are going to be, really psychologically damaging because it'll be personal. Whereas 9/11 wasn't impersonal, it was more impersonal. It was way up in the sky. It had to do with airplanes. It wasn't on the ground. All right, guerrilla tactics, where we're going to see a face or a masked individual dressed as somebody that we entrust. Like I said, police or military or something vice versa. Or they'll be dressed as protesters firing against police or military or first responders. And what will this do? And I'm talking about here in the country. Well, it'll basically divide the country, polarizing effects immediately. And then later on, the far right are going to say, listen, we need to enact really stricter immigration laws. I mean, completely shut down the border. Does that sound crackpot to you? Secondly, the extreme elements of the left are going to come under fire. Not literally, but maybe. And they'll basically say, we need gun reform. Because if what I think is going to happen, the citizens are going to take matters into their own hands and maybe fire inadvertently against first responders thinking they're terrorists, right? If this is going, maybe that's too extreme, right? Maybe. But, I could see a backlash against minorities, immigrants in this direction, okay? And what will happen? Oh, we need tougher gun laws. Even if that doesn't happen, the left Democrats who are basically, the extreme, they're conservatives, right? The extreme conservatives, because there is no progressivism or classic conservatism anymore. All we have is extremism in this country. And they'll basically, enact for tougher gun regulation, especially in the red states where there's more guns. I could see this happening. And then, of course, the public will say, we want a pound of flesh. Like I said, yes, we'll need to go to war and, we'll engage in war. And, this will basically, it'll destroy us financially in the long run because we really can't afford this. I mean, we're still reeling under the inflation rates, which started under the end of the Obama administration and basically have skyrocketed under Trump and continued to skyrocket under Biden. And we haven't felt a reprieve yet. There has been a business recession of sorts here in New York City, especially after COVID. And, I could see, COVID regulations happening in the first couple of weeks after this terrorist attack, to keep people away from each other since we can't trust each other or something to that effect, I could see actually happening because I think what COVID was basically a test to see how would we react to federally and state mandates regarding a non-lethal virus. It was basically them watching us to see how we would react and whether we would fight back, and we didn't. We acted irrationally as well, and also disinformation was abound, and we believed it. Not to say that the federal government didn't disinform us as well, or misinform us, or didn't inform us of everything, because they didn't. And they basically are trying to get to hear of all of us, and they basically have most likely won there. And of course, all right, I'll end it there because I didn't want to go off on a tangent, but I'm really concerned about this. And we'll know in a week and a half whether the United States gets involved. If they don't, this is the time to be more vigilant. Don't fall into a lull, because the quiet means that a noise is coming, a storm is coming. And it might be a storm that we can't overcome. But if we're better prepared, we could be better prepared for the effects of the storm. All right. All right, guys. Any type of breaking news, you'll hear first. And I'm probably going to be uploading almost every day regarding this situation. All right. Have a great weekend, please. It's going to be very hot. Take care of yourselves. Take care.